As we continue to look at the Enlightenment and how those ideas really struck a wave of revolutions, we're going to look today at the French Revolution. And when we last checked in with the French under Louis XIV, some disastrous wars and lavish spending had really put them in a tight spot when it comes to economics. That really hasn't changed as we now are in the late 1700s in France. King Louis XVI now is going to call together the Estates General for some advice. Created centuries earlier, the Estates General tried to borrow the idea of Parliament from the British as being an advisory board or council. And it had three main parts. The first estate would be the clergy, the second the nobles, and then the third estate, really everybody else. These would be representatives from the merchant middle class, the bourgeoisie, if you will. The third estate will be demanding a new constitution at this meeting at Versailles in 1789. Being locked out of the meeting, they will reform themselves in the tennis courts of the Grand Mansion of Versailles and take what is called the tennis court oath. They will say, we're going to stay until we get a new constitution. They would work towards and eventually produce, under the name of National Assembly, a document known as the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. John Green's going to call this the Doromac, if you will. We're going to recognize that it says a lot of the same things that the Declaration of Independence had recognized when it comes to rights that should be protected, sovereignty of the people and their opinions, and running a government. Basically, a recipe for democracy. This is important because people are seizing opportunities to change, and this is really going to start the ball rolling towards a move to expand the rights of the people versus an overpowering monarchical power. Later on, there will be actually a storming of the symbolic fortress in Paris known as the Bastille to represent this overcoming of long-standing oppression. You might be careful what you ask for, though, because the train ride that comes after is going to be quite a wild one for about the next decade or so. The National Assembly in the next event is going to complete a new French Constitution in 1791. Following many riots in Paris, Louis XVI will attempt to escape. The National Assembly is taking power here, not going to really follow the wishes of the people when it comes to religion and when it comes to the direction of the state. This is where the National Assembly kind of takes on the role of being the man. Are they really finding the needs of the people, or once in power, do you do what you have to do to stay in power? And that's kind of the charge here being made at the National Assembly. Finally, they will create a constitution, and the idea is that they want a constitutional monarchy. They see the British system as really being an effective one. Factions or parties within this arrangement will begin splitting up, and old problems that had always been issues continue to be problems as this new government tries to move forward. Why is this important? All of these changes then alarm other European monarchs. This threatens the status quo. Is this revolutionary movement going to move into my neck of the woods? The Legislative Assembly, which is what this new government will be known as, will engage in a war in 1792 with Prussia and Austria. It's much easier to stay united in your cause if you have a common enemy. And so foreign enemies were seen as a good way to keep this French movement united. The goal was a republic. The result, of course, would be otherwise. So moving on to Louis XVI being beheaded in 1793. In the face of Prussia advancing on Paris and rumors and pressure, the Legislative Assembly will set aside the Constitution. Nothing says we're in power like setting aside the document that says there were going to be a democracy. They will depose the king and create a new national convention. A group or political group known as the Jacobins will dominate the national convention here. And those who were considered supporters of the king will be dangerous. This is where the radicalization of the movement or of the revolution really makes it dangerous to oppose. And many revolutions will take this this level, or they will reach this stage. When radicals are in charge and they're decision makers, they will do whatever they have to do to stay in power. The National Convention will then accuse Louis XVI of treason, and he will be executed. This is important because once the king is gone, the idea of a constitutional monarchy is done. And this leaves the French to what's going to happen next. The big plan really isn't achievable anymore because they don't have a king. So where this train ride goes next is going to be very dangerous. The Committee of Public Safety then will be created to rule France in 1793 and 1794. The radical control became more radical and dangerous. To make France safe, the Committee of Public Safety was created and given authority to cleanse threats. Ironically, the Committee of Public Safety made things very unsafe if you were seen as a challenge to this French authority. Under Maximilien Robespierre, they would execute thousands, some would say as many as 40,000, in public squares by virtue of the guillotine. The guillotine was the weapon of choice for these executioners. This was the Reign of Terror, and reigns of terror are common in revolutions to control populations. Anyone who is seen as dangerous to the revolutionary spirit will be eliminated. As time goes on, Maximilian himself will even become a victim. That changes in leadership, along with economic problems, brings the third government since 1789. Now they will institute a bicameral legislature with a 5-man executive body known as the Directory. So now the Directory is in charge. And our next note says that won't last long either. Napoleon had risen through the ranks of power in the French army because of these wars that were resulting from the French Revolution. So all these wars that they're fighting externally allows military personnel to gain notoriety and gain prestige. He rose in popularity because of his exploits. Think of Julius Caesar here as the Roman Republic is expanding and the generals become more and more important. They're going to gain popularity. By 1799, the Directory had lost control of the political situation in France, and Napoleon comes home with troops, much like Julius Caesar. He would surround the national legislature, and opponents would flee. Anyone who remained voted then to dissolve the Directory. And guess what they did? They gave Napoleon and 2 other councils power. Napoleon quickly becomes the first council, eliminates his opponents or his colleagues, and sounds familiar again, doesn't it? And will take on the position of dictator. He will lead France to extend success in war. He will be crowned emperor in 1804 by the Pope. In this unified effort to stop him, his conquering efforts in Europe will spell his end twice. So the rest of Europe really has to get together and say, we did like the revolution, but we definitely don't like what has come out of it. This Napoleon guy is dangerous for all of us. So Clemens von Metternich will be the most influential representative at the Congress of Vienna. By the winter of 1814-1815, 5 powers of Europe were meeting now to determine what is the fate of Europe once Napoleon has been toppled and exiled for the second time. Russia, Prussia, Austria, Great Britain, and France. This meeting of the powers will be dominated by the Prime Minister of Austria, Clemens von Metternich. This Congress of Vienna, as it is known, will seek to bring security and stability to Europe. Working together, they saw an opportunity to keep things safe for all of them. Metternich will dominate this meeting again and restore the balance of power. That's an important feature to understand, balance of power. When any one country becomes too powerful, others will work together to regain the balance. You don't want to become dominated. This is important because it favored conservative ideas of government. Let's go back to the days of kings, they would say. The ideas of democracy were seen as too liberal and too dangerous. They distrusted revolutions and republics. Steps were provided to provide and include new nations. They would create nations like the Netherlands. They would recognize the independence of Switzerland. Also a German confederation with Austria leading them. Again, Germany's still not unified. is several different kingdoms and countries and nations, but a confederation of German states will be created. They will show the ability of independent nations can cooperate. So revolutions continue with nationalism and extend beyond political power. This idea of nationalism, as Napoleon used it for the French to band together for their Frenchdom or their Frenchness, is going to be a theme as other nations band together to defeat them. This idea of nationalism is also going to be seen as the Americans were using their Americanness as a way of expelling the British. So the idea of nationalism or prime loyalty in your country is going to be an influential mark of this 19th century. More on that in the next unit. So nationalism, this prime loyalty, is a driving force for France and its opponents in the early 1800s. Once these wars are over, though, it doesn't go away. Continued expansion based on nationalistic attitudes, and this is why this is important, because the revolutions are going to continue instead of stop, and it's really going to be now not for the ideas of the Enlightenment, but through nationalism, and they're going to promote these ideas of the Enlightenment now through a nationalistic lens. Thanks.